I've made a few videos on airbrushing now, and I've been wanting to do a follow-up for a long while, because there's a couple of things that come up in comments over and over again when it comes to airbrushing. Many of you know I've been in the miniature gaming hobby since the mid-80s, and for a good long 20 odd years, well into the 2000s in fact, I flatly refused to get an airbrush. I didn't need one, I didn't want one, I had no space for one, and I thought they were expensive, hard to use, and it was cheating. I'd spend a fortune on rattle cans that I couldn't use most of the year, knowing that I'd be staring out of the window on cold or rainy days. No hobby for me today. Again. But cost isn't even the top comment I get when it comes to airbrushing. No, it's almost always about space. The comments all start the same way. I'd love an airbrush, but I don't have the space. A window. Ventilation. And it's almost always accompanied by something like, yeah, I really want one, but the noise will be too much for my landlord, my flatmates, family pets, deaf grandfather. I mean, how loud do people think a compressor is? Now, I can only assume that many of these people live in a house full of dust and dirt, because clearly a vacuum cleaner is just far too noisy. So today I'm going to show you that you don't need to spray in a soundproof, air-filtered auditorium by setting something up in the smallest, windowless, ventilation-deprived room in my house. And I didn't get my wife's permission for this, so we'll need to be quick. Hi, I'm Will, and you're watching The State of Play. Now, when I had the idea for this video, I was going to use all the equipment I already had, but that would mean using a big, expensive compressor and 3 or 4 quite costly airbrushes that you've already seen on my channel. And moving those backwards and forwards to a tiny room seemed to defeat the purpose of this video, which is about space, ease, and simplicity. And I wanted something that would work in a really tiny space. Think studio bedsit size in the centre of any major city. You know the ones I mean, over $1,000 a month for a place where you sleep on the cooker and shower in the refrigerator. So with space in mind, I reached out to Gallery, or Gallery as it might actually be pronounced. Mainly because, probably like you, I'd seen a bunch of videos covering their products and really needed to know if it was good equipment or not. Call it skeptical, eyebrow-raising hobby curiosity, otherwise known as nosy. Oh, and free. Gallery were immediately kind enough to furnish me with a whole range of products to help make this video possible. Now, I was actually sent this stuff over 6 months ago, so thank you Gallery for being patient, as I'm almost certain that you thought I just took the products and ran a mile. Surprise! Here I am! Most of you who watch regularly will know I love my Harder & Steenbeck Ultra 2024 plugged into my higher PSI compressor, but the Harder & Steenbeck airbrushes and my Sparmax dual hose compressor aren't exactly the most mobile of kits, don't have the smallest footprint, and aren't the most cost effective either. And well, you just don't need kit like that to spray a bunch of plastic models. Like, had I not taken stupid advice and started small, cheap and effectively crap, and then slowly upgraded over many years, I probably wouldn't have this kit either. After many years of wasted time and money, I could never understand the terrible advice you get with airbrushes. In this hobby, no one would realistically advise you to buy the cheapest brushes you can find, invest in terrible Amazon Basics paint, or to use your fingers to rip parts off a sprue. And yet, with airbrushes, that's exactly the kind of advice you get. Start cheap, see if you like it, and then upgrade later. Just imagine if you got marriage advice like that. My advice is to choose good quality, then only upgrade later if you want better quality. That was for airbrushes. Please don't take that advice for marriages. So absolutely not a super cheap Amazon makeup airbrush with one of those useless rechargeable compressors with terrible spray pressure and a lifespan that would make a carnival goldfish feel old. I went through 7 before realising they were just cheap and it would never work long term. Same feeling I had as a teenager dating girls from the Catholic school round the corner from my house. For this video, I wanted a small, windowless room, an affordable, super easy compact compressor, and a high quality mobile airbrush setup that won't break the bank. Certainly a price that doesn't make you want to swallow your own tongue. Now before I start, I want to add a big disclaimer. I'm using acrylic paint only. I just don't often airbrush with anything else. Although, on the occasions I do spray oils and enamels, I tend to thin them with a product called Zest It. which is a non-toxic, citrus-based, safer alternative to white spirit. I think it's made from the skin of citrus fruits. This product pretty much brings oils and enamels into a similar safety category as spraying acrylics. Like, not great to breathe, but less likely to blow a flammable explosive hole in your house. With all of these options, both acrylic and safer oils and enamels, I can't stress enough that you should use a mask. Now, which mask you use is up to you, but once atomized paint particles hit the air and dry, they become more like a powder, a dust, so you're not likely to need a mask rated for the Ebola virus. The airborne particles just aren't that small. If one of these was fine against a teeny tiny viral pathogen that spread rapidly around the world, then I'm pretty sure one of these will work for dusty paint particles. Still terrible for you if inhaled, but too big to go through most mask filters. In fact, one of the major issues you might have is the fine layer of dust left on the surfaces of your room depending on how long and how vigorously you sprayed. I can't recommend enough that you clean up before your partner sees it. See what I sacrificed for you guys? The spotless cleanup will probably take longer than the model painting. So this is what Gallery sent me, and I don't want to get into tearing these things apart, stripping them down, because this video is about cost-effective airbrushing when you have no space, and I want to focus on whether they solve the lack of space problem rather than parts and technicals. Suffice to say that if this stuff was crap, it wouldn't make it to a video on my channel anyway, and cost I'll get onto towards the end of the video. It's always a good idea, no matter where you're spraying, to have something to catch good chunks of overspray. The paint dust I was talking about before. I mean, you really don't need anything other than a surface cover. I'm sure you've seen many YouTubers just spraying models directly on a desk. Depending on what you choose here, tends to define how much overall space you're working with. I have a fold-away spray booth that I use because I discovered that when no window is available, I can get away with a stocking attached to the back vent that catches anything that the front sponge doesn't catch. My wife kindly donated the stockings because which couple needs stockings anymore after you've had a bunch of kids? When switched on, the internal fan in this thing sucks away the paint particles, and yes, this makes noise, which I know many of you were worried about, but the washing machine in this room, I can absolutely attest, makes far more noise than this booth. But even this booth is quite large if you're short on space and requires a bit of setup time. So if you're completely adamant you want something silent, then quite often I'll just pull out this small cardboard box that I cut into shape. It folds away flat and works great for limited space. I mean, it's not going to catch as much overspray as a dedicated spray booth, but if you've got limited space and aren't spraying for hours and hours and hours, it'll work. I used one of these for years in a small apartment before I moved into a larger house. Now, again, if we're talking about limited space, then you need a compressor that's solid enough to do the job, but not so big as to fill the room. My big Sparmax behemoth just wouldn't work in this setup. Yes, I could probably squeeze it in, but it's heavy and cumbersome to move backwards and forwards when needing to use this laundry room for its actual purpose. Whoever said we need clean clothes? Well, my wife. And my work colleagues. And civilization, I suppose. Surprisingly, there's not that many small compact compressors on the market that combine power with incredible ease of use. This is where I think Gallery got it spot on. This Serenair mini compressor is only 35 decibels, and I know those numbers don't mean squat to most people, but if I told you that the washing machine I mentioned earlier averages 75 decibels and a vacuum can go up to 80, then it puts the sound in context for those who have landlords, flatmates, or Karens who like to moan about noise. In terms of ease of use, you can connect two airbrushes, although you can only use one at a time, and you can store them on these holders. The buttons are so simple, a moron could figure them out. There's 5. The one in the middle turns it on and off, the one at the top jumps to the maximum pressure of 27 psi, and the bottom one, the lowest, at 15 psi. Honestly, I just think of these two as the primer and ink spray buttons. If you'd rather have more control over pressure, the 2 side buttons let you work up and down in increments, so you basically have a solid range that can spray thick primers at the top, thinned paints in the middle, and high flow inks and spatter effects at the bottom end. And for lazy people like me who tend to use fine pressure control valves on airbrushes so I can match the pressure to the paint I put in the cup, you just get to press buttons to get the balance right. It's all very well having found some space for a booth and a compressor, but without an airbrush you're getting nowhere fast. Now, the Serenair compressor actually comes with an airbrush, the incredibly named Classic CS36, with a 0.38mm needle. And after playing with this for a while, it's an airbrush. It sprays. But the build quality isn't great and feels like it was thrown in just so you could get started straight away. I guess with the intention of loving the compressor but immediately wanting to upgrade the brush. I mean, it's totally worth keeping to, I don't know, run into the ground with basic priming and spraying on streaking grime, but I'd recommend upgrading the brush as soon as you can. It's worth noting here that I don't want this video to be a review of airbrushes. This video is about showing those people with limited space that excuses just aren't gonna wash anymore. Yes, I'm attempting to remove any barrier you have for getting into airbrushing. Now, getting back to airbrushes, there's very little difference between them these days anyway. Same shape, same layout, most now have a dual action trigger, press down for air, pull back for paint, and this is the same for a $7 disposable Amazon airbrush as it is for the $400 Iwata custom Micron. The big difference is in build quality, part availability and innovation, and Gallery's higher end brushes, well basically every brush they sell except for the Serenair kit brush, are of a very good quality. And yes, I'm not gonna lie, I didn't expect that. After many years of cheap Chinese made brushes, I just expected these to be a bit better, if at all. But these are leagues ahead of the Amazon disposable straw with a needle in it type brush. So I try not to review brushes unless they have something uniquely different. I reviewed the Ultra 2024 because it had a newly designed collar which I felt was worth talking about, and I took a look at the now hard to find Sparmax Flyer, which had a super cool way of changing colours. Like, I still use both of these all the time. I mean, pretty much any airbrush from any brand all work the same way, and will work with the Gallery compressor. But if you are going to upgrade from the kit brush to another Gallery brush, then I'd probably say one of the Mobius brushes, which are more expensive, but you get what you pay for. Buy cheap, buy twice. And sadly in today's world it's often buying 3, 4 or 5 times. These more premium Mobius brushes come in 0.2 and 0.3mm needle sizes. Now I did ask, but it seems as though although you can swap the needles between the two, it's not recommended, because reasons. Apparently there's just a slight difference between the needles which could damage the internals of the brush over time. So here I have the 0.3, which is light years ahead of the one in the compressor box and looks and feels like a proper airbrush for grown-ups. I love my Harder and Steenbeck brushes, but this one almost feels more premium. I don't know how to explain it. Maybe it's weight, design. I know I said I wouldn't review the brush, but as an engineer, I actually love the way Gallery have made their nozzle with spiral airflow. It kind of reminds me of when Dyson created spiral suction on the bagless vacuum and everyone said, okay, so what? That aged well, didn't it? And something as simple as adding this flat section here takes so much strain off my thumb and wrist that I don't end up rubbing my hand for 3 hours after spraying. 50 is not the new 30. 30 is the new 30. This brush comes with spare parts, a quick connector, a nozzle cap for easy back flushing. If you do that, I don't recommend it. And even a tube of lube, because you'll love this airbrush that much. Wait, what? That's not what the lube's for. And for those of us who often forget how airbrushes come apart for deep cleaning, they were kind enough to put an entire diagram on the inside lid of the box. A genius little addition that other companies should really copy. But this is a traditional airbrush with a top trigger, and I know from many of the chats I've had with some of you that this just won't work for everyone. The older you get, the less dexterous your fingers become, and I'm fully aware that not everyone likes awkward triggers on the top. So Gallery also sent me this GAC Swallowtail airbrush, which sounds like it was named after the spicy Klingon dish made with worms. Now, this brush uses an actual trigger rather than a press and pull button on the top. For anyone who grew up pretending to be Han Solo, this will instantly feel comfortable in your hand. And it looks like that injection needle used to put Arnie to sleep in the original Total Recall movie. Gallery! Like 10 out of 10 for pure aesthetics. Who cares if it's an incredible airbrush when it can be used to cosplay at least 15 different sci-fi characters? This brush comes with 2 different sizes of paint cup and 3 different sizes of needle, 0.28, 0.5 and 0.7mm, so I'd argue this is better for priming larger things like terrain or tanks, but that addition of the smaller needle means you can use this for detail work. But if you're not used to being precise with a trigger like this, it'll take some getting used to. I suck at using this type of trigger right now, but I look great pretending to be Farrah Fawcett in Logan's Run. Just like the Mobius brushes, this also has a diagram on the box, and again the lube, so cleaning and maintaining isn't a trip to Google. And I'll be honest, this trigger type is far less brutal on your fingers, so if that's a concern of yours as you age, like me, this is a solid option. But you are going to sacrifice some precision for comfort. The last few things you're going to need in your minimally sized setup start with paint and thinners. Now, I'm not going to go through preparing paint in this video because again, this video is about finding space. When you've got limited space and no window, it really pays to be done quickly, so having stuff right there really helps. And planning your paints and how many colour changes beforehand means you spend less time fiddling and more time doing. I mean, you could even cheat and connect 2 brushes, one with the primer colour and one with the zenithal colour, and then just deep clean both at the end. But for colour changes and cleaning, you'll need rinsing water, a water pot, airbrush cleaner, and ideally a sealed pot to spray waste into, so you need space for these too. Again, I detail this process in my other video. So in the case of my tiny little 1m by 1m unventilated laundry room, I've got space for all these things. My cardboard spray booth and mask, my compact compressor and airbrushes, and my paints and cleaning stuff. That's it. And it all fits into this small, cramped, stuffy room the size of a phone booth, so I don't really want to hear people saying, I'd love an airbrush, but I don't have the space, a window, or ventilation anymore. As for noise, this whole setup is 35 decibels, which is quieter than a washing machine, a vacuum cleaner, a 6-hour session of Call of Duty, and sex, had by those of you who don't play 6 hours of Call of Duty. Okay, Will, what's this going to cost me then? Well, considering that cost isn't even the deciding factor for most people, I'd guess that it doesn't really matter, but if I broke this setup down for you, the cardboard box is obviously free. It's a recycled Amazon delivery box. The masks are left over from that period of time we would all rather forget. These are dirt cheap, under £10 for loads in a box. The Serenade compressor is £76, and shameless shill, I can get you 10% off if you use the discount code TheStateofPlay. But to be fair, you can get comparable priced compressors from Amazon if you hate influencers trying to sell you stuff, but I'll be honest, these will be louder, not as easy to use, and often cut out when they get too hot, but they will generally go to higher pressures if you wanted that. Now you'll have to check the prices on Gallery's website in your local currency, but in the UK the Mobius airbrush is £62 and the Swallowtail is £114. And if you didn't want to stretch to these, they have an Advanced Series Seeker for only £49. Now, nobody needs an airbrush. As I said in the beginning, I was in this hobby 20 years before I got my first airbrush. An airbrush is a speed tool. It lays down paint far quicker and smoother than you can with a brush. You can prime, zenithal, base coat, blend and do OSL far faster than you can with a paintbrush, but not all airbrushes and compressors are equal. Yes, you can get easily scammed. Super cheap airbrushes and compressors look like a great way to get into first time spraying, and whilst it may work for a short while, you'll be cleaning clogs and fixing issues more often than a janitor in a geriatric care home. And once you've done this 10 times or more with a crappy £7 brush, you'll wonder why you didn't invest in better in the first place. Which is exactly what I did with my wonderful wife of 20 years. Invest in better. There. I said it on my channel for the world to see. I'm very sorry that the laundry room was in a dusty mess. Can we just move on now, yeah? On the other hand, super expensive options don't mean you're going to instantly become a golden demon master. And none of these options make any difference if you don't have the space to do any of it. This is why I like these options from Gallery. And yes, I'm aware the big winner for space here is the Serenade compressor. And for airbrushes, it doesn't really matter what airbrush you connect to it. But the way I look at it is this: if you don't already own any kit and pick up their compressor and like it, then why not consider their airbrushes as well? I mean, I have to be honest, I wasn't expecting these to be so premium feeling with such a smooth trigger action. And I get to walk around pretending I'm an evil sci-fi doctor. I guess the point of this video is for me to satiate my curiosity by testing gallery products and end up with a video I can point people towards when I inevitably get comments about space and noise. And I suppose it was also for you, so you can consider whether you really do have space for an airbrush or you're just making excuses to avoid it. That's the question I'm going to leave you with today. As always, I'd like to say a huge thanks to my amazing patrons, and I've put a link in the video description for everyone to get 10% off any gallery products. It's a great way to help the channel whilst getting into airbrushing. For other hobby supplies, discounts, recommendations, tips or tricks, feel free to visit TheStateofPlay.co.uk. And that's the State of Play for today. I'll see you soon.